Last season, the New York Knicks went 21-45. They ended 12th in the Eastern Conference and they missed the playoffs. Their top performers were Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Mitchell Robinson. Their more interesting player on the team is Kevin Knox. Last year, Randle put up about 19.5 points per game, almost 10 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game on 46% from the field, and 27.7% from 3 on about 3.5 attempts per game. Now, Randle put up numbers. He's put up numbers his past couple years in the NBA. 2 years ago, he was with New Orleans after leaving LA, and he put up numbers. And this year with the Knicks, a team devoid of star talent, any talent at all, really. Randle had to put up numbers. He had to be one of the only people putting the ball in the basket. He's a good slasher and finisher. He finishes well at the rim. He's pretty mobile for the type of athlete he is, for his size, and he also handles the ball pretty well for a power forward, which allows him to drive from the perimeter. And he's also a pretty good facilitator for being a big. I know the Knicks offense ran a lot of offense through Randle, like he would be bringing the ball up. Even when he was on the Lakers, I remember Luke Walton would give him a lot of opportunity to handle the ball and kind of run the offense. He had a couple of triple doubles, but Randle is not a great shooter. Yeah, that kind of really limits him on offense because he's not a great enough finisher or a great enough handler of the ball to really make up for that shooting in being a first option. We saw that in his field goal percentage. He only shot 46% from the field as a big who mainly operates around the rim. Randle isn't really a true first scoring option. Really, he isn't a true second scoring option. He can maybe be a third scoring option on a successful team. RJ Barrett last year put up 14 points per game, 5 rebounds, about 2.5 assists on 40% from the field and 32% from 3 on 3.5 attempts per game. Now, it's really tough to be a scoring wing on the Knicks right now. There just isn't that many high-level playmakers on the team. Like, there is Elfrid Payton. Like, he's a great passer, but when your best passer is somebody who isn't that much of a threat putting the ball in the hoop on his own, that kind of limits the extent of his playmaking ability. So that's kind of why RJ Barrett struggled for much of the year last year, much of his rookie year. Most of RJ's points were unassisted. 35.4% of his 2-point field goals were unassisted. And most of those points for him came at the rim. He's a really good athlete, pretty bouncy, moves pretty well. He's a good ball handler, so he can get to the rim at a high rate. And he much prefers to get to the rim because he kind of struggled from outside last year. From all mid-range distances, he shot below 30%. Already I said his 3-point percentage was 32%. And from the free throw line, he shot 61.4%. A lot of struggles in terms of the jump shot for RJ. Gotta hope for some improvement. Mainly, it's gonna have to be coming from him. It's not like there was a high-level playmaker added to the team to really make offense easier for RJ this year, so Mitchell Robinson put up 10 points per game, 7 boards, 2 blocks on 74.2% from the field. Now, Mitchell Robinson is a shot blocking machine. He got 4.1 blocks per 100 possessions. He's a great catch and finish big. 92.4% of his field goal attempts were from 0 to 3 feet. And from that same range, he shot 77.5% from the field, which is absolutely insane. He had 185 dunks last year, and 61.6% of his field goal attempts are dunks. Robinson's impact is felt defensively via the defensive rating on and off splits. With Mitchell on the court, the Knicks had a 111.6 defensive rating, and without him on the court, the Knicks had a 114.8 defensive rating, a 3.2 difference in Mitchell Robinson's favor. The only downside of Mitchell Robinson's defense is the fact that he fouls a bit too much. Per 36 minutes, he averages 4.9 fouls per game. On the offensive side, his offensive game is limited. He doesn't really have a back-to-the-basket post-up game that he can confidently go to time in and time out, and the Knicks don't really go to him in the low post because he's not really a threat from there. So Mitchell Robinson is a center who really definitely relies on his guards and wings to really feed him the ball in favorable positions. So to kind of extend his offensive game, could he ever really develop a little post hook? If the defense is stopping him from getting to the rim entirely, could he develop a little finesse post hook if he's 3 feet and out from the rim? Or will he ever expand his range because he doesn't shoot mid-ranges at all and he doesn't shoot threes at all. Is he just going to limit his offensive game to being a run and dunk big, or is he going to try and space the floor in this new age NBA? Now, Kevin Knox is the only interesting player on this team because I'm pretty sure the Knicks are going to give up on Frank Ntilikina. Alonzo Trier had his 1 to 2 year run of fame. Kevin Knox is going into his 3rd year, and is this the latest Knick that the franchise is giving up on? Because so many of his counting numbers decreased from his first season to his second season. His scoring basically cut in half. His efficiency also fell off. So not only did he get less usage, but his efficiency also tailed. I don't know, are the Knicks just officially going to give up on another top 10 pick in their past? The Knicks had an interesting offseason, I guess you could say. They didn't make any trades, but in the draft, they took Obi Toppin 8th, and they took Emmanuel Quickley 25th. Obi Toppin is a high flyer, no pun intended, based off of him coming out of Dayton. But he is a high flyer, highlight reel type of player, can finish above the rim. He's the best, I guess you could say he's the best finisher in this draft class. So the offensive talent in terms of finishing at the rim is there. And he also has potential to be a lot more than that because he shot the ball pretty well in college. So he's this kind of floor spacing, slashing 4. He can handle the ball a bit. I saw him do some line drives to the basket pretty confidently. So he has a lot of offensive potential, but on the defensive end is where I hear he has the most issue. Undersized, he doesn't have the longest wingspan, and he's not that laterally quick. So this is going to be an interesting draft pick. The Knicks need a lot of help. They need help in terms of getting some high level talent in here, and Obi Toppin was probably somebody that a lot of people thought would go in the top 5, and he fell to 8, so that's good value. But the Knicks also needed a lot of playmaking on the team. That's something that Obi Toppin doesn't provide right away. And they also needed some defense on the perimeter, and that's definitely not something that Obi Toppin will provide either. Can the Knicks overcome Obi Toppin's weaknesses and really build around his strengths going forward? In terms of Emmanuel Quickley, I don't really know much about. I thought the Knicks were going to draft a point guard with their number 8 pick, and they didn't. But I guess they addressed their point guard weakness here in Emmanuel Quickley, or maybe he's more of a shooting guard. I don't really know. I didn't see the preseason games for the Knicks. I've heard a couple good things about him. In terms of signings, they signed Nerlens Noel. Now this one I just did not understand. Why would you sign Nerlens Noel when you basically have a better version of him in Mitchell Robinson right now that you're trying to develop? Because not only did they sign him, but they started him. Tom Thibodeau started him in their very first preseason game. They started Nerlens Noel. So I don't really know why they're doing that when you have Mitchell Robinson, this shot blocking, rim running machine who's only 20 or 21 years old that you would want to develop. I don't know why you would sign Nerlens Noel in the first place, because you know Tom Thibodeau is an old school coach who's going to start the veterans or the guys who are doing all the little things right and not making any mistakes in practice, instead of focusing on the development of guys that you hope will be the pillars of your franchise. So yeah, that kind of confused me, but I guess it doesn't matter because I'm pretty sure they're going to be getting equal minutes regardless. But looking at their depth chart at the guard positions, they have Elfrid Payton, Alec Burks, Frankie Smokes, and Austin Rivers. At the forward positions, they have RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Obi Toppin, and Kevin Knox. And at the center positions, they have Nerlens Noel and Mitchell Robinson. Now coaching them is Tom Thibodeau. Now I alluded to Tom Thibodeau's old school, I guess, behavior in terms of starting Noel over Mitchell Robinson. Now is that something that's going to carry over into his handling of the entire team? Is he going to struggle through mistakes that the rookies made? Like, is he going to struggle alongside of them, or is he just going to yank them out of the lineup or out of the game right away after they make mistake after mistake? Or is he going to allow the rookies to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes in game instead of yanking them and ripping them of valuable NBA experience? The Tom Thibodeau signing of a coach was just really interesting because I know the Knicks want to compete sooner rather than later. Their personnel is not one that signifies them competing sooner rather than later. This is going to be a long-term process, and I don't know if Tom Thibodeau is the right man to kind of head that process. Going into next season, I project the starting lineup to be Elfrid Payton, Alec Burks, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Nerlens Noel. I say Nerlens Noel because of that preseason game that I saw that Nerlens Noel started over Mitchell Robinson. Now, I haven't really been paying attention to the rest of the preseason for the Knicks, so maybe they started Mitchell Robinson over Noel for the other games, but I'm just projecting off that last game. I estimate their record to be 18-54, and I expect them to be the 15th seed in the East. I'm just keeping it real, man. Like, this Knicks team is still trash because they don't have a high-level playmaker that is also an offensive threat in terms of putting the ball in the basket themselves. They didn't add that, and that was really a weakness, and that was really something that could make life easy for people like RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and your draft pick Obi Toppin. But they didn't add that in free agency, and they didn't add that in the draft. And comparing them to other bottom dwellers around the Eastern Conference, the Cavaliers, they have two veterans, former star players in Andre Drummond and Kevin Love, who one of them might get traded, but they have them on the roster right now, so I think that gives them the upper hand. And then Colin Sexton is pretty underrated. He's an efficient 20 plus per game scorer, and you hope Darius Garland gets better. Isaac Okoro should provide some much needed defense, so that team really kind of fits. Another bottom dweller will be the Detroit Pistons, for the simple fact that they have Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin. I think that will carry them past the Knicks. The Bulls, I think they have more high-end talent than the Knicks. So yeah, the Knicks, their personnel just isn't, it just doesn't have that much talent. They're obviously going to miss the playoffs, and they're obviously rebuilding. There are a lot of question marks surrounding the New York Knicks. What is RJ's ceiling? Is he talented enough to be a lead ball handler and playmaker? How will old school coach Tom Thibodeau handle the minutes of young prospects? Will management pressure him to give more time to young bigs Obi Toppin and Mitchell Robinson instead of established vets Julius Randle and Nerlens Noel? So many questions regarding the New York Knicks personnel, but none pertain to how good the Knicks will be this year. They'll be bad, very bad, among the bottom dwellers of the Eastern Conference. I'm sorry, Knicks fans, but there's a lot of work left to do in order to reestablish glory in Madison Square Garden, the supposed mecca of basketball.